Hello, I'm Caroline Holmes and I'm delighted to welcome you to my garden. I think I may well have met many of you on the Viking cruises. We've lived here for over 40 years. It's a bit of a sort of wilderness, wildlife friendly traveller's garden. I let things self-seed, I let things just have free reign, and then you get some wonderful discoveries. It's very much a fruitful garden. We've got lots of apple trees, which you're going to see in a minute. Lots and lots of herbs, because when we first came here, I ran a herb nursery here, and herbs, scent, taste are absolutely key to my enjoyment of plants and gardens. So if we come through into the garden, you can see I've laid out a very informal knot garden, because the house itself dates back to the late 15th century. 1480, they have said. Very wild and woolly. We're looking here end of September, beginning of October, after an amazingly dry summer. But then we've had some rain, and look how everything has come back to life. Now you may be looking at my teasels and thinking, well, why on earth is she allowing that kind of wild and woolly look? They will be fabulous for Christmas decorations, and while they're at this seed setting stage, the birds come and eat the seeds as well, so we're feeding them while we're doing everything else. And I always leave, you see the yellow flowers of the evening primrose? Through the summer they give us a lovely scent. They are, again, rather, they get around, shall we say. You'll see them in many very different positions. Coming out of the sunshine of the knot garden, we come into the shade of the old apple tree, which was one of the only trees that was here when we came here in the early 1970s. And it has created a wonderful shady area that we have planted up with cyclamen that form these gorgeous pools of white and pink that show up beautifully in this dappled shade. And this wonderful old apple tree is one of the few original trees. Look at that fabulous bark. I love bark. Where it was originally, where the top was grafted onto the bottom there. Really absolutely fantastic. Then we come round and it's shady. We've got the mulberry tree propped up. David's magnificent construction here to stop anybody falling down into our ditch. And you come through and we've got under the canopy of the mulberry, and we have the wisteria arch. Now obviously you're looking at this the wrong time of year. May, June, it's a mass, and we've got white flowers on this side and purple flowers on this side. There are no flowers, but it still is the most wonderful frame for our cottage as you look through from here. The leaves of the wisteria are so gorgeous, and again, if you're looking at bark interest, the way it's climbed its way up the metal framework that we've got here is absolutely fantastic. It's been in 20 years, I would say, very well established. What I like to do with the house, with the cottage, whichever one wants to call it, is to use pots. And so I've got quite a selection of pots, and it's also a very good way of seeing whether a plant's going to work in the garden or not. But most of all is I do spring bulbs here all the way along. And if you're looking right the way in the background, you'll see that one of the other things, which I have to say is not me, it's Mr. Holmes David, is the use of water butts. We love a water butt. So you go from wonderful flowers in pots and containers, and you look across and you see two very practical watering cans and a water butt. We've got 4 water butts around the house. Now this looks a bit of a mess, and it's the marjorams that have all gone through flowering and coming up to seed. Now you may say, why have I not cut these back? Because as the evenings get colder and when we get rain, they give off the most fabulous scent, which I absolutely love. These verbascum mulleins, which have seeded themselves in the path, he is going to have to go because he's in the wrong place. But we won't be unkind at the moment and come round, and this is where we like to sit. And to sort of divide the garden up a bit, I put in hornbeam. And its Latin name for hornbeam is Carpinus, and I'm going to introduce you to Carpinus in a moment. But the hornbeam just give structure to the garden. So they're trained over wooden frames. And then I've already mentioned we are late September, so everything has been allowed to go to seed. And once you get to know what the actual seed leaves look like, the first, what they call the first rough leaf stage, you think, oh yes, that was a good idea, I'll leave you there, or you take them out. The interesting thing about this old place is where is the front of the house and where is the back of the house. This is what we call the front of the house, and I'm underneath the canopy of a medlar tree as we make our way into the hornbeam arbour. And you can see the structure as we go down. This is about 30 years old now. In the summer, it's wonderful greenery and full shade. We've just trimmed it, so it's dappled shade now. And then in the late winter, early spring, underneath all the hornbeam trunks, I've planted snowdrops. And they create a carpet of white. It looks like it's snowed inside the hornbeam arbour here. And as we go down, you may spot there's a little bit of light, and we're going to go right into the orchard. You can see the apples cascading down over there, looking absolutely wonderful. Despite their very red colour, they're actually Blenheim orange apples. Huge stand of Angelica that we've got here. And if you come round, you can just see the autumn crocus, the Crocus colchicum, very, very poisonous. I devised the poison planting and the poison garden at Alnwick amongst my many skills. And we come through. The orchard itself, we planted 40 odd years. I keep saying 40 and 30 years ago. It's amazing how time passes. And inevitably, some of the fruit trees have not thrived as well as others. So if we come here, for example, rather curious combination of activities going on here, the crabapple tree died. And when some of our trees have died, I then use the base for growing vegetables, which helps to clean the soil. And this has been my big success this year. I will talk about these in a moment. But I actually mulched the soil here to create a lovely bed for beans, for climbing beans. We've got the bark of the crabapple. And in my compost were a whole lot of tomato seeds, unbeknown to me, which in turn have added to the whole look, and I'm absolutely thrilled. So I've got tomatoes and I've got beans growing off here. Now, this is my little topical tip. I mean, it doesn't have to be gin and tonic, but if you have clear plastic bottles like this, I cut the bottoms off early in the year, use them as cloches to protect my seedlings, and I keep the tops to go on canes so that nobody takes their eye out when looking forward to admire my tomatoes and my beans. We've got here, this is an apricot we bought, a tomcot variety, and this is one friends raised from seed. It's only went in this year, so we'll see how it does. That one's been in 2 or 3 years, but has yet to have any fruit. Bramley apple behind there, it's one of the apples that most people know. We've got a russet apple here. Then the other, going back to sort of Tudor writings, it was always suggested you should line your north boundary with walnuts. So we put walnuts, that's our north boundary, behind you, or rather in front of me as we go there. Then we come through. We've got rosemary in lots of parts of the garden. So one of our big old rosemaries was dying last year, so I took cuttings from it and then I've planted them in a circle round the apricot. You can take cuttings in a variety of ways. Here in the autumn, that is the moment. I should be, if I just break a piece off like that and show you. For the autumn cuttings, and my good gardener's fingernails, you want a heel cutting. And that heel on the rosemary cutting means, I don't understand exactly, a part of me understands why it works, but that means it's much hardier. You can put that in a pot, you trim it back a bit, put it in a pot, and that will root over winter. If you're taking your cuttings earlier in the year, you need to look for that young growth which has now matured. But if you were to take your cuttings, let's say in May or June, you would take a tip cutting and you take a cutting directly under the bud there. That roots quicker, but it's not as hardy as the heel cutting you've got here. Now the good news, not only about growing it, but if you eat it. Now I love rosemary biscuits. Make a shortbread biscuit and put rosemary leaves in it. Oh gosh, this is oily, wonderfully smelly. It's also known as an incense plant in France, and at the moment it's smelling very much like incense. Eating it improves your memory and improves your circulation, hence rosemary being a symbol of remembrance. And then tucked in here is actually a French variety of apple, which has got evening primrose and wonderful bronze fennel. Now a little tip, if you've put weight on, it's the wrong time of the year, but if you eat fennel seed here, well that's actually fennel flowers, I'm not going to eat it because it'll stop me talking. It anaesthetises the taste buds and stops you feeling hungry. So if you chew fennel seeds, you lose weight because you won't need to eat. Coming through, and I might say the view is not quite as good as it might be, but the keyhole that we've cut into the yew is what goes through to what we grandly call our croquet lawn, where I'm not taking you because it's not quite up to croquet lawn standards at this particular moment. But you can see the wonderful new pear. The trees here died and we put in this absolutely extraordinary Guyot pear, which we have yet to pick. Absolutely enormous and wonderful. Underplanted with salvia, with scented sage. And there are many, many different forms, lovely little pretty flowers. And they flower nice and late in the year. And a lovely sort of fruity blackcurranty scent. We put 2 pears in last year, and the other pear that we've got here is completely lost. Hasn't produced any pears as such, by yet again one of my evening primroses, which I so love because of the scent it gives. And those yellows and whites in the evening give you a gorgeous colour that comes up beautifully. One of my absolutely favourite lemon-scented plants is the lemon-scented verbena, Aloysia citriodora, splendid name. It's on the tender side, which is why I've got it in a pot. If you're in a much more sheltered area, and particularly if you live by the sea, there's no fear of frost, you can put it in the ground. But I have both of mine in pots, and the flowers are fairly indifferent, but the scent is absolutely fantastic. It's like sort of Bronley's lemon soap when that existed, and it is gorgeous. You can have it in teas or just have it somewhere where you can touch it as you walk past. So coming away from the orchard, you can see the range of fruit trees that we've got here, majoring on apple trees. And we have apples in every possible form. I love to cook and I love to eat. I have a long-standing love of eating. And we've come past the 2 French varieties of apples. Now, I have to say, British apples are better, I think, than French apples, but French pears are better than ours. And you can all argue about that particular one. And it brings us to the living tree house, which is being created by David out of an ash tree. Lovely bark we've got here. If you look carefully, you can start to see where he's building the floors in to the tree house. Our grandchildren are only 3 and 10 months old, so it doesn't matter. It'll be a few years before it's finally finished, but it'll be a nice climbing tree. They quite like being lifted into it as just now. And hopefully at one point they'll be able to do that on their own. thank you so much for joining me in our garden. And this garden is an integral part of my life. I have written 12 books. I have researched and worked on every continent in the world except for Antarctica. And one of my great pleasures is to be a guest speaker on Viking cruises. So all my ideas that I have gleaned from around the world, I can then put together and put out. You can enjoy my conversations through the pages of my books, or you can enjoy them in person with me, and I will look forward to seeing you on the next Viking cruise.